Hey, I'm your storyteller. I'd love to know where you're watching from. You can tell me in the comments section. When you are ready, lean back, and let's dive into this week's horror stories. I grew up hiking a lot, so I've always been comfortable in the woods. That comfort is probably what got me into trouble the evening of this incident. I had been on the trail before with friends, but this time I went alone. My plan was to knock out the loop before dark and be back at my car by dinner. I didn't even think to throw a flashlight into my bag because I never imagined I'd still be out there once the sun went down. The first couple of hours were fine. At some point, though, I realized I had lost the main trail. It started as a hunch. Things just didn't look like how I remembered them. The dirt path under my feet narrowed until it looked more like a deer track. When I stopped to check the GPS on my phone, I saw I had no service. That wasn't surprising in this part of the state, but it was enough to make me feel uneasy. I turned around to head back the way I came, only to find that everything looked identical. The trees, the rocks, the slope of the ground, it was all a mirror of itself in every direction. I picked the path I thought was right and pushed forward, but after another 20 minutes I knew I was completely lost. By then, the sunlight was fading fast. The woods get dark earlier than you expect because of how thick the canopy is. By the time the sun actually sets, you're already standing in shadows so heavy you can barely see your shoes. I kept moving, but every step made me more anxious. I had no flashlight, no signal, and my phone battery was almost half gone. That's when I saw something that still creeps me out to this day. First, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but there, maybe 50 yards ahead, a flashlight beam lit through the trees. It bobbed and swayed like someone walking. Relief hit me so fast I actually shouted before I could think. "Hey, I'm over here." The light paused. Then a man's voice called back, rough but clear. "Follow me. I know the way out." How did he know I was lost? I didn't have time to question it. The beam shifted as the man turned and started walking away from me. I picked up my pace, practically jogging to catch up. But something felt strange. No matter how fast I moved, the light never seemed to get closer. It was always just out of reach, hovering between the trunks like a lure. I yelled again, asking him to wait up, but he didn't answer. He just kept walking, the flashlight swinging back and forth in front of him. My chest tightened, but I kept going. At that point, following him felt like the only option. Minutes passed. The woods grew darker until I could barely make out the shapes of trees. The only thing I could see was that moving glow ahead. Then, without warning, it blinked out. The sudden darkness was overwhelming. I stood there with my heart pounding, straining my ears. Nothing. Not the crunch of footsteps, not the rustle of leaves, not even the steady rhythm of someone breathing nearby. Just silence. I pulled my phone out and turned on the flashlight. The weak LED barely lit 6 feet in front of me. Beyond that, everything was swallowed in black. The beam was so narrow it felt like I was looking through a tunnel. Every direction outside that cone of light felt alive, like something was waiting for me just beyond what I could see. I started moving again in the direction the man had been leading me. A couple of times I heard branches snap somewhere to the side. My light couldn't reach far enough to show anything. I stopped every time it happened, sweeping the phone flashlight back and forth. The silence that followed each sound was suffocating. I told myself to keep going straight and not panic. If I stopped now, I'd just get turned around even worse. My arm ached from holding the phone out, but I didn't dare put it down. My thoughts kept circling back to the man's voice, the way he had answered me right away and assumed I was lost, and the fact that I could never quite close the distance between us. After what felt like forever, the trees began to thin. Then I stepped out onto asphalt. A road. My knees almost gave out from the relief. I stood there on the shoulder, staring back into the wall of black trees. Nothing moved. Nothing shined. Eventually, headlights appeared in the distance, and I waved down the car. A middle-aged man pulled over, rolled down his window, and asked if I was all right. I just told him I'd gotten lost hiking. He gave me a ride back into town, and I don't think I've ever been so grateful for human company. I've never been back to that trail. I don't even know if I could find the spot again. But I think about it all the time, how quickly he answered me, how I could never catch him, and how the light vanished the second I committed to following it deeper in. This actually happened to me a few years ago, and I still can't explain it. I'm an amateur hunter, mostly small game and deer when I can get time off from work. One weekend, I went up to some state forest a couple hours from my town. I got there early in the morning, parked my truck at the edge of a trail, and hiked into a fairly dense part of the woods. I knew the area a little from maps and past trips, but I was mostly exploring. Around mid-morning, I spotted a buck, perfect size, standing near a clearing. I set up, aimed, and took my shot. The deer ran off, and for a second I thought everything was normal and that I'd just missed. But then I heard another gunshot. It was almost identical to mine. I yelled out, but I didn't get a response. Thinking nothing more of it, I tracked the deer a little further, then saw movement again. Another deer. This one was smaller, and instinctively I raised my rifle and fired. Almost immediately the same shot echoed back, but this time it sounded closer, way closer. I stopped. "Who's there?" I shouted. Still no response. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone else was hunting illegally. Maybe it was a hunter from another state line. But why wouldn't they respond? And why were they firing every time I did? I figured I'd move along the trail to see if I could find anyone. That's when I realized something. The further I went, the denser the forest became. Landmarks I thought I remembered didn't make sense. Then I heard it again. A single gunshot. But this time it wasn't coming from the clearing. It was coming from somewhere deep in the woods. I lowered my rifle, trying to listen, but it got quiet again. I started moving, trying to follow a stream I thought led back to the trail. Every few steps I fired into the air, thinking the noise might scare whoever or whatever it was. Each shot echoed back almost instantly, and each time it sounded closer than before. The woods were silent otherwise. That echo made it feel like something was circling me. I kept moving, trying to retrace my steps. The sky was starting to darken. I realized I had no idea which direction the truck or main trail even was. After what felt like hours, I found a small clearing and decided to stop. I crouched down, trying to gather myself. Then, faintly at first, I heard it. The echo from a gunshot again. I ran. I didn't care where I was going, just ran through the thick underbrush, over roots and rocks, trying not to trip. After what felt like forever, I stumbled onto a faint path I recognized from my maps. I didn't stop until I reached the truck, jumped in, and locked the doors. I sat there, breathing hard, listening for a few minutes before eventually driving away. I didn't tell anyone in my hunting group. They probably would have laughed, said I was imagining things. Every time I think about it, I swear it wasn't just an echo. It got closer each time, and whoever it was clearly wasn't in their right mind. I've always loved camping alone. I know a lot of people think it's reckless, but for me, being out in the woods with nothing but the sounds of nature is calming. I don't have to talk, don't have to perform for anyone. I can just exist. I've done it a dozen times without anything more exciting than a raccoon trying to get into my food bag. Last summer, I drove out to a state forest about 4 hours from where I live. I'd picked it because it was less popular than some of the bigger parks, which meant fewer people around. That's what I wanted. Quiet. I hiked about 1.5 miles from the trailhead and set up camp near a creek. My tent was tucked between a few pines with just enough space for me and my gear. The first night was perfect. Cool air, the sound of running water, not a single human voice anywhere. I sat by my little campfire and read until it burned down to embers, then went to bed. The next day I decided to do a longer hike, just wandering further from camp with a day pack. I followed the creek for a while, then cut up through a thicker patch of woods. Around mid-afternoon, I stumbled onto a clearing I hadn't seen on my map. It was maybe 30 feet across, almost circular, with grass and ferns instead of the usual undergrowth. The thing that caught my eye immediately was the backpack in the middle. I thought someone had left it there to mark the spot or maybe gone to grab water, but when I walked closer I realized it wasn't just dropped, it was ruined. The front pocket was ripped wide open and the straps were shredded. The material looked slashed more than worn out, but what bothered me was that the pack didn't look old. It was a modern brand, still pretty clean, like someone had bought it in the last year or so. I knelt down and checked inside. A torn notebook with a few blank pages left, some crumpled wrappers, and a cracked water bottle. No ID, no phone, nothing that told me who it belonged to. There was one page that said something I'll never forget. "Don't go near the whistling, it's not human." I sat there, not sure if this was a joke or not. That's when I noticed the trees. All around the edge of the clearing, several trunks had long scratches running down them. I thought of bears, but the lines were too neat and evenly spaced. It was like something sharp had been dragged across with intent. Some of the scratches went 3 or 4 feet high, others closer to eye level. I remember this uneasy feeling settling in. If it was an animal, why only here? Why the backpack left in the middle? I was still crouched over the pack when I heard it. A soft crack, like a foot snapping a twig. I whipped my head up and looked around the trees, but I saw no one. I convinced myself it could have been a deer, but deep down I didn't fully believe it. Then I heard it again. It wasn't a twig this time, but the faint crunch of leaves. Closer. "Hello? Someone there?" No answer. I picked up my pace and started backing out of the clearing, eyes darting between the trees. Every instinct told me I wasn't alone. The scratches, the ruined pack, the note. It all felt wrong. The sound came again, off to my left. I turned and headed quickly back the way I'd come, keeping my flashlight sweeping between trunks. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. After maybe 5 minutes of fast walking, I finally recognized the creek and followed it back to camp. I kept glancing over my shoulder the entire time, convinced I'd see someone or something standing there. But there was nothing. When I got to camp, everything was exactly how I left it. My tent was untouched, gear still packed. But I couldn't forget what had just happened. I sat there for a long time, listening. I didn't hear any more unusual sounds, but I couldn't relax. I barely slept that night. Every rustle of leaves made me sit up. At one point, maybe around 2 a.m., I swore I heard someone whistle near my tent. I gripped my knife and stayed awake until dawn. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I packed my gear and hiked out as fast as I could. The backpack wasn't mine, the scratches weren't from any animal I know, and whatever made those steps moved with intent. Maybe the owner of that backpack had gotten lost and left their bag in a panic. Or maybe it was some sick joke. Or worse. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing as it shows the YouTube algorithm that you enjoy my content. I'll see you next week for another horror story video.